Welcome to the Consistent Elite Performance Podcast, which is focused on helping you strengthen your soft skills of mental toughness and leadership. Today, we had a great guest in Brad Malone. He has a great story of being a Canadian that went to the States and then got to go to NCAA and then is played and still playing pro from the NHL and the AHL. So there's lots of great stories here on his mindset and what it took to get to that level, the lessons he learned and the mistakes and the mental and limiting beliefs that he had along the way. So lots of good little lessons in here. Make sure you check it out and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Campoli trying to clear it. Burrow shoots, scores!
All right, Brad, thanks for joining. Let's dive in. Why don't you just share, your quick story, your career to where you are right now?
Yeah. So I'm from New Brunswick, Canada, and left home at 15 to go down to prep school for a few years. My dad was a first-round pick in the O and a first-round pick in the NHL, and never played a game. So when he retired at 23 and came back and basically just had a GED. So he worked his ass off to, provide for my brother and I, and as well as my mom. But, the biggest thing for both of them was, education is important. Hockey's kind of secondary. So I took that path and, decided to go against kind of the grain back then, especially, and being a Canadian guy and trying to play college. So I did 2 years of prep school, and then I did 1 year of the USHL, and then 4 years at the University of North Dakota before turning pro. So, those 7 years or whatever of being away from home and kind of being on my own was a huge experience, being from where I'm from. And
Yeah,
I just, there's not many people I could really relate to in terms of like that had that experience.
yeah,
And then once I turned pro, I think it was like, those experiences, kind of really helped me adjust a lot quicker than some, just because I was on my own for so long and kind of away from a ton of support. So yeah, it's been a long journey. I guess it's be my like 9th or 10th year pro now. So I've been seeing a lot of stuff.
yeah. And you've been up and down a handful of different NHL teams and NHL teams, so you've had quite the pro experience so far. Any kind of major highlights you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, that first game, you always like remember your first game. And I
Mhm.
really remember my first pro game. It was after our college season. We finished in like early April, and then the American League had playoffs, and Colorado's organization was in Cleveland at the time. So I signed like a PTO, and my first game was against the Manitoba Moose in like game 1 of the playoffs. And it was like, I just remember how like focused and like energized I was, and like, the adrenaline was just pumping. And then we played a back-to-back, where the next game we played was like the next day at 3:00, and I was like the worst player on the ice for game 2. Like I'm sure the coaches were like, who is this person? Like A game to like C game. And it was just because I just didn't have the capability of like flushing and like readjusting. I was just living on a high from the game before, and I just kind of walked into the game being like, oh, this is going to be easy. But I was like, I was in a wholly different mindset, because before the first game, I was like, I was so jacked up.
And then it was hard to carry in. No, that's great. And one of the things, and we were chatting about before we got on here, and I think is a big area for players to learn, is just like, the mindset, particularly like the thoughts, the principles, or the concepts that help drive you as a player to play at your best. And you talked about, and a lot of players, and I did early on, like the book Hockey Tough by Saul Miller. And there's some good principles to learn from there. And as well, obviously, I want you to color in like some of the ones that hold you back. Like, oh, I had expectations, like things were just going to be easy, like that kind of thought and belief system that can backfire. So, we'll take a bit of time here, but I think that would be the main thing I wanted to do today. I know we're going to do a couple other episodes down the line. What were some of the top ones? I think you said you read Hockey Tough in your second year at college.
Yeah, they gave me my first year at university. I was an 18-year-old, and I was just, I was in over my head, really, like, physically and even like just maturity wise. Like I just, I was really clawing, holding on just to keep myself in the lineup. And, I just didn't even realize just practice habits, like I thought practice was just practice. And, at a program like UND, like, the guys go to war, and there's professionalism every day. Like if you're not out there performing in practice, the coach isn't going to put you in a situation to, to play well. Like you're just gonna, you're gonna have to learn, the hard way.
Yeah.
And my second year, they had kind of like a intern coach or whatever, and he was doing his sports psych masters.
Mm-hmm.
And so he put on this class for us and read Hockey Tough. And so the first one, I think there was like the ABCs, like the three
Yeah.
things that you focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of like, I got married to that. Like, I was always like, move your feet, like, get the puck deep, and like kind of like, the simple things that would help my role. And then the visualization thing was a lot of, I wasn't scoring much, so I started like kind of like visualizing myself scoring and stuff. And then I got to the point where it was like, if I didn't do that, I thought I wouldn't play well. So I almost took the book
Yeah.
almost
You
too
were
far,
saying. Yeah.
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 So that was something that I had to really kind of tinker with and kind of adjust. And the only real way to do it was just to kind of go through the experience. So like by the time I left by my senior year and I went in to turn pro, like I had kind of a mental routine kind of set. But then even once I got to pro, I realized like you play 3 games in 3 nights in the minors, and like, I just mentally wasn't prepared to kind of handle all of that information and kind of the roller coaster of a season within kind of just adjusting and kind of, be honest, just flushing the negative or the positive, really. Like you got to really learn to just kind of stay even.
Yeah. 100%. We talk a lot about, we use the word reset routine, but that ability to flush, which is like deal with what's happened, right? Like, how do you like
Yeah.
reflect after, decompress, deal with the successes or the failures and the struggles and the adversities or the, the little wins and the, elated feelings we get, and stay more neutral or centered and
Yeah.
grounded. And then, so you come into the next game, inspired, focused, dialed back in, instead of staying caught up, mid game or, post game, becomes such an important process. And that takes, maturity, but it's also just understanding some of those concepts. Like you said, I love the ABC one, or like getting really clear on what's your process, what are the key action items, and how do you want to do that? We're big on that. And then that ties into your visualization. And one of the other things that I think on the flip side of that, we were talking about before, is like, you don't want to have too many things you're doing on the mental side of the game. It can like work against you. And we're big on like, we want it to be simple. What are the ones that are most effective for you, a routine? And we have tons of other exercises, but it's like, we never usually make everybody do all of them all at one time. It's like we pull in and out of that based on what that athlete needs. So one of the funny ones, and maybe you want to elaborate more on that, the flip side of like what didn't work, was like superstitions is a common one. I know I had superstitions. I had
Yeah.
someone messaged me the other day, like, what do I do about superstitions? And it's like, routines are helpful. Superstitions aren't, right? Routines can help you get in the right mindset, but then superstitions, it's like, well, if I don't do this, it doesn't work. Well, like, not necessarily. Like, you can completely blow up your routine one day and you could probably still do fine. Like, if you're prepared and you get dialed in and focused once the puck drops, that's what matters. What you did 3 hours before the game, 2 hours, doesn't matter that much. It can be helpful to have a nice routine. You want to eat well and be nutrition and sleep well, but from like which way you tape your stick, when you did what, if you visualize or not, those are little things that add up over time. But in terms of like, don't develop a superstition necessarily about it, develop a routine. So do you want to maybe, I was sorry, I might have answered some of your question for you, but I think, it'd be great to hear more about your experience with like superstitions versus routines, and like what worked and what didn't work particularly. Cause I think it's always great to share, the struggles and failures along the way. So.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, it was college. It was such a routine experience. Like you knew you played Friday, Saturday, Sunday was off. And, like the week of practices were very, catered to just consistency. So if you could kind of get married just to the team's process of how things were conducted, they physically, created a routine for you. But mentally, for me, like I was really, really superstitious. Like I would tie my skates before a game at like when the clock showed like a certain number, and like I would carry like the sniffers in the locker room, and I would snap it at like the same time. And it did become a routine, but like I'm sure from like outside when people were looking at me, like they're like, this guy is nuts. Like I was so married to the routine. Like I was like by the minute, by the second.
Yeah.
Like once I got to the rink, like away from the rink, I was pretty relaxed. But like once I got there, it was like I turned into business mode almost like 3 hours before the game. And then when you get to the time to actually play, like mentally I'd be exhausted. Like
Oh yeah.
sometimes, like you're not my energy was already spent on getting ready instead of like just preparing, like, and
Yeah.
being able to, just be ready. So I had to learn a ton about that, like with just don't exhaust yourself with the process of getting ready. Just enjoy the
Yeah.
process of getting ready, and then just be ready to go.
Yeah. No,
Like
and
there's
a couple good comments there, and get your feedback on. One is like, like you want to play dialed in, an optimal arousal level. You don't prepare for 2-3 hours at that level. Like you're going to exhaust yourself. And like,
yeah,
so it's like, at what point do you dial it up? And I even tell, like, as goalies, as an example, like they can't be dialed in a whole game. Like the puck goes the other end. You need to relax for a second. Like, and the pucks
yeah,
you dial it back up. And so it's the same for players in every sport. Like there's a time and a place to have it dialed in, and that's like, hey, let's prepare, and be in the right mindset, but also be loose. And I think being creative and not necessarily creative, but like having fun and enjoying around, like almost joking around to a degree, and having a bit more of a loose atmosphere can sometimes be helpful. And a lot of guys in pro, you see, like
yeah,
they're quite loose, and you have to find what works for you. But I know it's a common thing as players rise the ranks, so they start to be like, well, it's just serious business, for 3 hours before a game,
yeah,
and that
exactly.
usually backfires. So, and that's not the best approach for certain people. So, I'm not sure if you want to elaborate a bit more on that, because I think that's a big point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just because, as you get more into pro and you get into, just for me, like playing, in the NHL, it was every game was like a playoff game for me, like I needed to play a certain way just to stay in the lineup. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was demanding physically for me, like the way I played.
Yeah.
And so mentally, I learned that when I walked into the rink, if I just kind of left, like everything I was thinking about, like kind of, I would always say, just leave it at the door. And
Mm-hmm.
like when I walked in, it was just like, I walked in kind of calm and just like, and loose. And then as, once like warm up gets going, and like, I kind of would turn on my like focus. Like, it's like, hit your shots, aim, like crisp
Mm-hmm.
passes. And I just kind of like, I just learned to focus on being like a good pro, like in execution. And
Mm-hmm.
if I just focused on my execution and warm-ups, then by the time game time came around, I think it just kind of translated. And then I realized that it didn't start in warm-ups, it started in practice, like I said. So I
Yeah.
think I just kind of learned over time. It's like, I watch some of the young kids now in practice, and I'm like, you're not making tape to tape passes, and I don't expect you to make, every pass perfect, but it's like, I would rather see you like trying to make a good pass than
Yeah.
just throwing it and hoping. Like
Yeah.
it leads into, better habits. And then even mentally, like you just feel better about yourself when you're just
Yeah.
focusing on executing. Like
Yeah.
it sounds kind of cliche, but if you just like focus on the little things, it does so much for the big picture.
Yeah. No, it's like loving your craft, right? Like if you're gonna do
Yeah.
something, do it well, and do it well consistently. Like don't like turn it on and off. Like it's that's gonna backfire. And like you said, like you learned that in North Dakota, like you had to practice like a professional versus just practicing to practice. So
And I
uh,
like didn't realize though, like that's only me now speaking from that as a
yeah,
31-year-old. Like when I
yeah,
was in my
yeah.
teens and early 20s, I was like, I was just doing it because I thought that's what they wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to like almost do it because that's what everyone else was doing. And I was more so being a follower and just trying to be a part of something. And as I got older, I was like, okay, no, they were actually like trying to help me be a pro, like
Mm-hmm.
every day.
Yeah,
And it's like, if you can get 20 to 25 guys on that page, like you get so much better, so much faster as a team because everyone's trying to like execute at a higher level.
yeah,
Like there is flow days and like feel good days, but at the end of the day, like even in those practices, like you
yeah,
still want to be sharp.
yeah,
Like your mind remembers
yeah,
for whatever reason, they remembers the negative before the positive.
yeah.
And it's just something that you can help yourself kind of get over that hump by just, you know, being
Yeah.
married to your craft.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think, and there's benefits, not just to your craft, but then also, like you're saying, benefits to your mindset. Like when you're showing up and you carry yourself in a certain way, and you're very clear on who you are and what you stand for, that carries through, right? And that carries through into the games, because it's like
Yeah.
you're very certain in who you are versus like a guy that's showing up and it's just like whatever, it's practice, not as certain, or he or she's not as certain and who they are as a person, as an athlete, their identity and persona of their best self is not clearly laid out. And it's just like they're kind of lost in the gray zone. And then so then the odds of them being at their best self in games become less and less. And they're, easily influenced by external sources more and more because
Yeah,
they're not as clear, crystal clear and dialed in on their craft and who they are. So I'm
it's
not sure
just
you want to add anything else to that, but I think
yeah.
you
I
said
was
it
gonna
well.
say it's funny because like for me like my job as a pro hockey player is basically just like to work. Like
Mm-hmm.
like that's my strength is to like to work and execute like the systems just because I'm like I'm a checker and whatever like
Mm-hmm.
at the highest level. But then
Mm-hmm.
I see like the skill guys and like their job is to be skilled
Mm-hmm.
and the really good ones like their skill even is evident in practice and they're consistent like through the season because they practice with that kind of pace and skill. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like some guys I played with would be like, they'd have 4 points one night and then, they get benched the next night. Those are the guys usually that I would say were the ones that didn't practice with that type of like intention,
Mm-hmm.
and it was funny to kind of like see it going through. Like you'd have some guys in the minors that would be NHL skill and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't understand why they couldn't make it to the next level. And usually it was just because of their consistency. And a lot of it
Yeah.
would come back to just their practice habits,
Yeah.
which is like, you hate to be that guy to be like, oh, practice is important, like nobody likes that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
But those are the guys that end up on championship teams. So
yeah,
yeah.
it was funny. And then you're
Yeah.
talking about like external factors. Like a couple years ago, I was like an extra forward in Edmonton for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And like I literally was just there to practice and like take warm-ups.
Yeah.
And so I would like, at the start I was really married to like making sure if anything happened I'd get ready. And then one time I just like, I'm just gonna sit on the couch, have coffee. Like there's no way I'm playing.
Yeah.
And I put my skates on with like my workout socks on. And then in comes a trainer and they like take Connor's jersey like out of his stall. And I was like, they're like, oh, he's sick tonight. Like Brad, you're playing. So I was like, okay, like all right, I'll dial it in. But I took warm-ups like in this like a high like part of the lineup as like a center.
Yeah.
And anyway, by the time game time came around, like obviously things got resituated.
Yeah.
But after the game, I go on my phone and my like social media is like littered with negative energy because like
Yeah.
all the Edmonton fans were like, I can't believe this Malone guy is our center, like just like lighting me up. And I'm like I can't imagine being like in that spotlight all the time. Like some of those guys that like, not even just the guys in Edmonton, but like just around Canada, like the spotlight that they have on them, like every shift is like, I'm like, God, I couldn't imagine if you didn't have like a strong head around like on you, you would just get like tossed around like in the wind. It would be ridiculous.
That's so common. I don't know if you want to speak to it anymore too, and we'll wrap up. But because I have like guys like going in their NHL draft, and then they're going online. You can read so much about you in your NHL draft year, or let alone OHL and stuff. A guy, and he's like, I did it. He's like, I spent like a day. He's like, and then he's like, I knew I should have done it. I was like, yeah, like you like got to keep perspective and got back to owning who he was and his process. But I'm not sure if you want to speak to that. But yeah, there's a lot of times we want to learn to how to deal with those outside forces and make sure we're our own best friend, not, our own worst enemy, because when we dive into that other stuff, and if you're not certain on who you are, then it's really going to kind of throw you off. So I'm not sure if you want to say any more things on that topic, because it's a big one.
I mean, it's just like, it's funny because like people take those comments so literal, but I'm like, have you ever met the person who's typing them on the other side? Like, I think you got to understand everyone has an opinion and everyone can share them now, but now there's a point where like you got everybody with an opinion. And if you listen to everyone's opinion, like there's going to be 900 different directions. And if you're not like concrete on who you are, like, I mean, you can read them if you want, but you just got to realize that a lot of it should be for humor.
Yeah.
you should know, like if they're saying something and it makes you like, you're like, oh, I kind of agree. Then maybe like maybe they're right, but like don't take it as like a negative. Like you get enough criticism from yourself and coaching staff. You don't need the extra. I mean, it's something I'm trying to like, I just have Twitter just to like screw it around, but like, I can't imagine, man, like the young guys, like even like the World Junior kids that just like went through it. Like, they're sitting in their hotel room that whole time. And it's like, what they're doing. They're going on social media. Like
Yeah.
There's no way they're not. Like,
Yeah.
it's a huge distraction too at a certain point.
Yeah. So now you got to learn how to manage that and know what to focus on and how to filter out all those opinions. So, no, that's great. Well, let's wrap it up because I know we're going to do, one or two more of these, do a little series on different topics. But what I'd like to do to wrap up, is there any other kind of thoughts on just like the importance? Because I know you were talking about earlier, just like how important that is and how you wish you kind of learned it earlier, a lot of these concepts and principles and worked on your mental game. Any other kind of final thoughts to wrap up here?
Yeah, I just think it's something that, like, as hockey players, we think like, you got to work on your shot, work on your passing, your skating, like all that stuff. And then, usually the next thing after that is like get in the gym and like
Mm-hmm.
work on your body. And I'm like, I think it's just important for like younger guys to understand you got to work on your mind. And it doesn't mean like, you need to go, see a psychologist and like, pour all your feelings out. I think it's just, you
Yeah.
got to have a confidence in yourself that your thought process needs to be kind of trained.
Yeah.
And your mind can do a lot of like great things, but it can also do a lot of negatives. So if you don't coach yourself and realize and kind of understand some of the triggers that can happen, it's just going to hinder your process and like hinder you down the road. So I just think the younger and the more confident you are in your own thoughts, I think it just goes a long way with becoming the athlete or the hockey player that you want to be.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll touch base again soon. All
All
right.
right. Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you.